Pedro Martinez, who was born in Mexico, came to Chicago with his family when he was 5 years old. The oldest of 12 children, he is a product of the Chicago public school system and a proud graduate of Benito Juarez Community Academy in Pilsen. He credits CPS teachers with changing the trajectory of his life. He was the first in his family to graduate from high school and college, and he chose to dedicate his life to education. A former Chicago Public Schools CFO, Pedro was also the superintendent of San Antonio Public Schools and the state of Nevada superintendent before being named CPS CEO in September of 2021. He is the first Latino to hold that position on a permanent basis. He received his BA from the University of Illinois in Champaign and his MBA from DePaul University. He is also a graduate of the Broad Superintendent Academy. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Pedro Martinez.
You know, coming back to Chicago for me, it really was coming back home. There are so many relationships that are here in this room that many of you remember me. I remember most of you. I was gone for 12 years, so I apologize for that. But I'll tell you, for me, there's nothing like coming back home. So let me start. When I started at Chicago Public Schools in September, I was excited to return to the school district that I graduated from and the city that welcomed me as a Mexican immigrant at the age of 5. Nearly 20 years ago, this district helped launch my career as an educational leader, making this a full circle journey, both personally and professionally. 6 months in, despite facing a myriad of challenges, and you guys have read all the headlines, I can still say that I feel invigorated to lead our district in a way that strengthens our communities, stabilizes our schools, and above all, supports our students to become the future leaders of our city and the world. Last week, I visited one elementary school in the Southwest Side to highlight therapeutic art and music programs for our diverse learners. While I was there, I met a 7th grader with Down syndrome who shared that he was planning to dress up as the Grinch to participate in the polar plunge this last weekend. By the way, everybody, he raised over $60,000. He was wearing his medals because he's an all-star in the Special Olympics. And this was a cause that united the school community, and you could feel the joy in every classroom as myself and Bogdana were touring all the rooms. Visiting schools and spending time with students has always been the best part of this job, because no matter what may be happening at the district level, it is a grounding experience. It reminds me why I do the work that I do. What is interesting is that in our high schools, our students are very direct, and they'll tell you what's ever in their mind. So for all the parents of high school students, you know what I mean. From Kenwood to Amundsen to Simeon to Prosser, I was just at Curie today. Across our city, what students have shared with me is how much support they're receiving from adults who are fully invested in their success. By the way, this shows up in our data very clearly in our high schools. Elementary school students, on the other hand, tend to be less talkative to me, but I can tell so much from how they act in the classroom. Seeing how engaged they are, it shows me that their learning is not only that they're learning, and it reinforces me that they need to be in our schoolrooms, that they need to be in person. That's where they belong. Visiting schools and classrooms across the city informs my leadership, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Nothing shapes my vision for CPS more than time spent in schools. The pandemic had the potential to discourage our students for years onward, but that's not what I'm seeing in our classrooms. I see joy, I see resilience, I see collaboration, and I certainly see learning taking place. Seeing our students continue to embody these qualities despite the challenges of COVID-19 makes having a strong data-driven decision at the district level even more important, because we want to continue to cultivate these qualities rather than hinder them. The vision is also crucial because our district is at a crossroads right now. For the past decade, we have experienced remarkable progress. I always point to our graduation rate. 10 years ago, in 2011, our graduation rate was 56.9%. By the way, people who grew up in my era, I graduated in the 80s, I won't say my age, but I'm in my 50s. But in my era, we always share these common stories about how many children started as 9th graders and how few children finished. We share these stories all across the city. It doesn't matter what part of the city you grew up in. I am proud to say that in this last year that we finished, our graduation rate was over 83.8%, the highest ever. And our students, by the way, we have one of the highest college-going rates in the country for a district our size. Our students generate over $1 billion with a B every year consistently in scholarships. However, many of our academic metrics peaked 3 years ago. In part due to the pandemic, our academic gaps are wider than ever. In the upcoming months, we'll be rolling out a blueprint that will set a path forward for our district with ambitious goals and plans, setting a high bar for ourselves and for our students. So what does the future look like? If you remember nothing from what I shared today, I want you to think of the letter A when you think of CPS. Now, all of you as students, hopefully you all pursued A's. Hopefully I'm seeing my A and B students, maybe some C students out here in the audience, but hopefully you're all pursuing A's. The first A to talk about, unsurprisingly, is academics. The good news about our academics is that this school year is already shaping up to be a strong foundation that we can build on. This was the first school year, and please, ladies and gentlemen, the first school year since 2018, think about that for a second, where students started the year in their classrooms and stayed there. We did have that work stoppage, but we won't talk about that. But for the most part, stayed there. And we're already seeing very promising results. Attendance rates are up. The number of D's and F's being earned are down. Freshmen on track rates, which are key indicators for graduation rates, and student survey data shows that students are strong, and student survey data shows that students are feeling more supported this year. We have a rich amount of research in our district, and one of the things, those measures are our strongest indicators for students for succeeding, not only graduating, but also success in post-secondary. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that the past few school years have been extremely tough for many of our students, and that learning has been disrupted, and their social and emotional well-being has also been impacted. That's why our approach will combine resources for all schools and classrooms to take advantage of, while also offering targeted supports for our highest need schools and students. We're focused on strengthening our instructional core by doubling down on literacy supports to accelerate learning, especially for our youngest learners. Providing the highest need schools with additional tutoring through our tutor corps and increasing counselor positions to best meet mental health and social and emotional needs of our students. We're also implementing Skyline, our first ever standards-aligned curriculum that is available for all students from pre-K to 12th grade. Skyline will be the backbone of our efforts to ensure that high-quality instruction is consistent across all the neighborhoods in Chicago. These resources at the classroom level will be essential to helping our students return to more successful academic trajectories on the other side of the pandemic. And let's hope we're on the other side. However, our vision would not be complete if it did not include a plan for long-term sustainability. So let's talk about the next A. The next A is access. When I think of our enrollment declines in CPS, I think about the same scenario happening over and over. By the way, I grew up here in the city, I know this. It starts the same way each time, with a family feeling that educational opportunities that are down the block or around the corner are inadequate for their children. So they send their children to a school in another neighborhood, or even on the other side of the city. Eventually, the inconvenience gets frustrating. So they leave the district. In many cases, they leave Chicago altogether. Any way you slice CPS academic progress over the past decades, our neighborhood schools are the forefront of those gains. However, the availability and the quality of programs has been uneven across our city. Some of our schools have an abundance of enrichment programs, while others have far less. Whether students are interested in STEM, fine and performing arts, world language, or any other academic disciplines, high-quality opportunities should be at their fingertips. We're also fully committed to expanding access to universal preschool. Research shows that children who experience quality early childhood education programs are more likely to graduate from high school and college, and every child in every neighborhood deserves that opportunity. And finally, the last thing that I want to talk about is alignment. So vital because it is the glue that connects all of our priorities. I view alignment as important for CPS in a few different ways. First, of which evolves around our district's finances. As the district's former chief financial officer, this is an area that I feel very confident in. I'm pleased to share that the rating agencies continue to take note of our improving financial state. We have balanced budgets and strong debt management. We don't want this good news to be an island, though. Instead, we're committed to aligning our financial trajectory with supporting our schools directly. 2 weeks ago, we brought our principals together to discuss our plan for the next few school years. And what we heard over and over again, and what our school leaders want, is they want to accelerate learning, improve social and emotional outcomes, but they need more support in doing so. That support, first and foremost, is going to come financially, and we're fully prepared to just do that. We also need to give our school leaders plenty of time to plan. By gathering their feedback now, we can put them in the best position to meet our unique needs of their communities when the school year begins. By the way, folks, this was the first time we've ever brought our principals in this early in the planning process. This was over 500 schools. We are aligned in our mission of support, but this will not be a one-size-fits-all. Our plan is to go school by school, being very intentional about how we understand and resource our students and communities. Our city is a city of neighborhoods. Every neighborhood has its history, and we want to honor and respect those neighborhoods. I see the alignment being critical when it comes to partnerships. There are too many top-notch partnerships taking place in our communities to name, but there are a few in particular that need to be recognized. First and foremost, we're grateful to our continued convergence and partnership with the City Colleges of Chicago. Chancellor Salgado and I, we've known each other for more than 20 years. We have an initiative called the Chicago Roadmap. The initiative centers on the community colleges and CPS pulling our resources to equitably increase student outcomes in college readiness, enrollment, and persistence. Chancellor Salgado and I are also examining the possibility of adding P-TECH programs. I want you to hear that term, P-TECH programs. You'll be hearing more about that in the future. These are programs that enable high school students to earn college credit hours up to an associate's degree. I have a lot of experience in creating these for other districts, with industry certifications in areas such as advanced manufacturing, technology, and healthcare. For our business leaders, this will create great opportunities for our businesses to partner directly with our high schools. There's also a lot to celebrate when it comes to community-centered partnerships that are supporting some of our highest need students. One of those is Choose to Change, which is currently providing 1,000 of our students with intensive social and emotional support, including weekly behavioral health sessions. I want to encourage everyone listening today, if you have an interest in partnering with our district in any way to support our schools and students, an opportunity exists for you to do so now. If you want to support a school financially, our Children First Fund, our philanthropic arm, can connect you with a school that can benefit greatly from your support. If you want to provide students with a work-based learning opportunity, employers, I really need these for our students, because if you see the talent that I'm seeing, consider reaching out to our career and technical education team. This can be a huge step forward in having a more well-trained workforce and a stronger economy. If you simply want to volunteer at a school for a day, that is great too. When Chicagoans get to know our students, no matter how big or small the occasion, our communities blossom just a little bit more. And that's the note that I want to end on today. As COVID-19 cases continue to decrease, the question we're left with is how do we come together to address the issues that are too big for our schools to tackle on their own? I outlined 3 A's today. I want to leave you with one more. The word is action. We have the opportunity to reimagine education in our 3rd largest city of the country. Think about that for a second. We have that opportunity right now. Engage with us. I want you to see the wonderful potential that our students have, that I get to see on a daily basis. They will be your future employees, your future leaders, and your future competitors. I want to remind everyone listening that our economic future as a city is intertwined with the future of our schools. Your contributions ensure a pipeline of educated, talented workers. Let's grow our economy, and let's grow the opportunities for every business and every student. That concludes my remarks for this afternoon. I'll now turn it over to Brandis for Q&A. Thank you, everyone.
This is kind of like a reunion. I don't know how many in-person events you all have done in the last few months, but it's kind of exciting to see all of you in person and to hear from Pedro in person. So I wouldn't be a self-respecting journalist if I didn't start a little bit with the news of the week. And obviously there's been plenty regarding masks. Now, we spoke with currently Vice President Stacey Davis Gates last night on Chicago Tonight. That's not a plug at all. They say that to lift the mask mandate is a violation of the memorandum of agreement that you all, they left their jobs for 5 days to reach said agreement. I think a lot of parents want to know, where does this lead? Because we hate to use the scary words work stoppage, which are hugely disruptive, but where does this go?
So first of all, there's a couple of things that I want our parents and community to know. Our district is going to take charge of decisions. And we're always going to follow the science. We're going to follow what's right. Am I naive to not understand the politics, not to understand all the different complexities here in the city? I'm not. This is the first time in 2 years that I've seen at the national, state, and local level all in complete alignment. We have never seen cases this low. We have never seen positivity rates this low. The recommendations from the science, from the healthcare professionals, including Dr. Awadi, is that we're at a low risk. We consulted with them. And I respect our CTU leadership. We have been in conversations for weeks now talking about the fact that this is the direction the district has to go. So, I'm not concerned about, potential concerns of what may happen in terms of any interruptions. I think all of us are dedicated. I'll tell you, my teachers, they're committed to their children. I see it every day as we look at classrooms and what's happening. For our parents, I want you to make sure you know, if we see conditions change, because we're very nimble, we will adjust and we will make sure that that safety will always be a priority, but we have to be in control because the reality is that this pandemic changes too quickly. And so that was what the decision was about this week, and and I've shared that with our CTU leadership.
How would you compare the ability, the power of the Chicago Teachers Union to teachers unions and organizations that you've seen in other districts where you've worked? I've been doing this for 20 years, ladies and gentlemen. Very familiar with districts across the country. I've been superintendent, CEO in 3 different districts, 4 different cities I've worked in, 3 different states. I've seen the gamut. Very familiar with New York and LA. I think the challenge that I see here, and this is what I saw coming into the district, there's been such a level of mistrust in our community that is something that I saw immediately. And by the way, that flowed internally as well. So one of the first challenges that I had to do is I had to make sure I started building some stability and confidence, even internally. Bogdana and I, for example, we are in constant touch with our principals. We don't do anything without our principals being part of it. What I've seen here is that we've allowed organizations, frankly, to gain so much power. And you see it, how it's playing out in the state legislature. You see it sometimes, how it plays out in the media. I don't mind being scrutinized. Hey, you sign up for that. I don't mind being held accountable. You sign up for that. And guess what? That helps us to be better. So I always say that publicly. But we have to really pay attention as all of us living here in the city. This is my city. I grew up here. We have to make sure we see the bigger picture of what happens when we let organizations take us too far to one side or the other. And I'm saying this, everybody, coming from Texas, which is cray-cray when it comes to politics, which I was getting pushed on the right, and now I feel like I'm getting pushed on the left. And what I will tell you is the majority of our families are in the middle, and they don't like drama. And so what they're going to ask of you, and I'll say this on behalf of them, let's stop the drama. Let's focus on the things that matter, how our children are doing, what is the best conditions for them, hold me accountable, hold my team accountable to have high expectations, to make the right investments, hold me accountable as taxpayers. I welcome that. But let's change the conversation and let's focus on what's right for our children, because that's what's going to make our city better. Hang on, I'm just writing that down. So Texas is cray-cray. So
You know this. You've been in the South.
I am tweeting that later. So
you've been in the South. You know this.
I am from the South, and I have lived in Texas, and I have no comment. So I want to talk about.
When it comes to politics, I'm saying.
Yes, there's a lot to be said about Texas and their politics. But I want to talk about you and your background a little bit, and then we'll get back into a little bit more of the CPS stuff. As mentioned, and as is in your bio, you immigrated from Mexico with your family at the age of 5, oldest of 12 kids. And we can come back to that later. But what might remote
We didn't have a TV.
What might remote learning have looked like in the house that you grew up in?
One of the things that I have been very public about, and I saw this in my former district in San Antonio, where we had 90% poverty. I say this, and not kiddingly, when you go to the South and you see in some of these cities the impact of segregation, the impact of bias and how it plays out economically and the housing that exists, I've never seen anything like it. In San Antonio, neighborhoods that look like alleys, they don't have streets, they didn't have internet because the infrastructure wasn't in the ground. We had to put in our own fiber. I say all that, fast forward, we go to remote learning. What our teachers saw, and what our teachers saw both in my former district and here, is you got to see the home lives of the children. And for anybody who's grown up poor, anybody in this room, the one thing you had going for you was you got to go to school and people didn't get to see how you lived. That was the one thing we all had going for us. That got taken away with remote learning. And so I could play it out myself, and I'm sorry, I get angry about this. I could see being that student in a 2-bedroom apartment, a whole bunch of kids running in the background, right? My father doing the best he can. He didn't choose to be poor, 2nd grade education. My mother didn't choose to be poor. And I could see, Martinez, turn on the camera. And I could see myself saying like, no, I'm not gonna turn it on. Turn on that camera, Martinez. I could see that playing out, right? Because it is so unfair to have this pandemic, because all we're doing is just showing the significant disparities that exist across our society. And we saw it academically. We see it in our results. We've seen more students starting the school year below grade level, especially our youngest learners. By the way, this generation, it'll be known, research reports will be coming out for years. The generation of no preschool, the generation of less kindergarten, the generation of some skipped college because they didn't want to start remote. And it's always going to be our students that have less. And so can remote learning be something that can work? Absolutely. But it has to be used strategically. And we have to recognize that our facilities, which is one of my frustrations, which is I want to invest more in our classrooms, our facilities can be the equalizer and should be the equalizer to these issues that exist, that have long existed in our community, that you can't fix right away. And so for me, that's what I saw remote learning do, and that's why I've been such a proponent to making sure that unless the whole city shuts down, unless the whole country shuts down, I want to see our children in person.
You have 3 sisters. Now, of those 11 siblings, you have 3 sisters who teach in the district. You've got 28 nieces and nephews who are also in CPS schools. You're obviously a CPS parent. How much of your family, and not just as a dad whose kids go to CPS schools, but also with the input of relatives, how much of that influences your perspective and your how much input do they get on your leadership?
One of the things that's great, I'll tell you, I would always, so now that, I'm in my 3rd, round of superintendency CEO leadership, I mentor quite a few people around the country. And one of the things I share with them is that as a leader, whether you're a superintendent, CEO, school district, any organization, it's great when the life around you also informs your leadership. So for example, as a father, I'm seeing firsthand, I'm a consumer. So by the way, when I go to my school, my neighborhood school, I'm a father. I am not the CEO. And I make it really clear. And although, some people get nervous, right? But I'm there just watching as a consumer. When I look at my sisters, and they always, they'll call me and they'll say, okay, do you want me to tell you this as a CEO or as a brother, older brother? And I said, tell me as both. And they'll tell me what happened, and I'll give them advice. But for me, all this work is so personal and integrated. And what I really believe it does is it makes me a stronger leader. So I'm very attuned to what's happening in classrooms. My sisters have networks of teachers, so unfortunately I know a little bit too much about what happens in the inner works of the teacher political world.
Just tell me later. Thanks.
But it informs my leadership, and I think it actually makes me a more sensitive and more empathetic leader.
We were talking earlier, and do you guys remember the snowstorm earlier in February? And as the CEO, he's agonizing. Cancel schools tomorrow, don't cancel schools tomorrow. I live in Evanston, we canceled schools. As you know, CPS remained open that day. He makes this decision, and it was the 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Of all the people who might have been disappointed in him for not canceling, his son was the most angry for not, so.
Got up yelling at me, cancel school, call a snow day, yelling at me. And I just said, I am not gonna take this from my 11-year-old. I've just been asking all night, and that's what I wake up to. I said, no. I went to work early that day.
And sent him to school, obviously. You graduated CPS schools yourself, obviously went on to work for the district for some time before going out and then coming back. Your background, though, it's not necessarily in the classroom, in accounting, in management, and some argue that the district needs an educator to be its leader. How has your background prepared you for this position?
So I've been very blessed. Not many people go into, we call the non-traditional path and end up here. First of all, to be fair, I never planned on being in education. I started in the private sector. I was in consulting, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte & Touche. Life is funny here in Chicago. I ended up with the Archdiocese of Chicago, Catholic Charities. I know there's quite a few people there from my former organization. Found my mission and passion for serving the poor. Ended up in CPS when CEO Duncan became the CEO. Didn't plan to be in education. I thought, okay, I'll help because I was more angry when I came to CPS the first time because I was so upset about the outcomes. My high school, Benito Juarez, was not doing well. That's what got me involved in CPS in the beginning. And so came back, never thought I would end up in education, but Dr. Barbara Eason Watkins, who was our chief education officer, took me under her shoulders and really mentored me. They're the ones that really convinced me to go into education. So I spent the next several years, including leading a set of schools here in the West Side in Chicago, also getting deep in curriculum, supervising principals, redesigning schools, and then I took the plunge to become a superintendent, and now this is my third leadership experience. I feel very blessed, but I will tell you, today, and I tell this to our teachers, you are the most powerful beings in our society. You have the power to shape a child's mind even more than what parents can do, and you can help them see things that we can't see as students. We can't see when you grow up in poverty or when you grow up feeling like there's something wrong with you, right? That there's a bright future. That you can actually, in this country, you have the opportunity to reach your dreams. You can't see it as a student. Our teachers, our counselors, they have that power. Our principals have that power. And so for me, I am always in awe, and that's why I love going to schools and watching. I always tell our kindergarten teachers especially, you guys walk on water. Our parents would not survive without kindergarten classes. Let's call it parents. You would not survive. How they keep those 20 plus kids in order when we can barely do it with one or two, be honest. They walk on water, but that's what our teachers do every day. And so I will always respect teachers. I will always respect our school leaders. My role is to serve them. The team that we're building, that is what we talk about. That's what Bogdana says every day. Our role is to serve schools. She's a special ed teacher. She's done it all. Principal, network chief, has been in central office, and she always, she's a good mentor for me as well right now, and I'm a good mentor for her. That we're going to create a team that our goal is to serve the schools.
So, speaking of money, get it? Because now we're speaking of money. The district is receiving the $1.8 billion, and more than that, but I think in this last round, right, about $1.8 billion in federal stimulus funds. How are you directing that money to improving outcomes? Because you've also talked about like the substantial gap that the pandemic has created.
So I want you to think of it in a couple ways. A big portion of funds were just, really were spent in the early years, last year and this year, to stabilize the district. Because the district would have went in windfall. It was pretty bad, folks. The remote learning was a difficult experience for all of our staff, for all of our children and parents. I was preaching to the choir, right? So the funds were used first to stabilize, then they were used to reopen. And so remember, our children had not had a stable year for 3 years. This was their first school year that they were coming in person. So a lot of resources were spent and are being spent right now to just stabilize and reopen. What I see our next phase is about reimagining. What I see an opportunity now is to build on our strengths. We see the gaps, and it's a great time for us, and we're having these conversations, and we're going to be, in the next few months, you'll be seeing a blueprint that talks about how do we reimagine services for our special ed or diverse learners? How do we reimagine our career tech programs to where the future is going? This connection of tying certificates. In my former district, I created schools where children got associate degrees while being in high school, connected to internships, partnering with businesses in our fastest growing industries. That is the future of where education is going. It's also a time to double down on early literacy, to double down on interventions. Children right now that are still struggling. As a parent, you should expect from us that, hey, if your child is struggling, A, you should know about it, and B, we should be able to tell you what we're going to do about it. That is a commitment that we want to make. And making sure that our staff feel set up for success. Many of our staff this year didn't feel that. Not all because of the district, but just the conditions that occurred across our community. We want to make sure they're set up for success. We want to build their confidence. And I'll tell you, when we talk to students, the one thing that I do love, and we're seeing this in our data and our both surveys and as well as talking to students, our students are seeing more support from our staff more than ever, because we know it's been a difficult year. What we want to do now is make sure that the academic supports are just as strong. And so that's what you're going to see in our blueprint that will come out in a few months.
How do you balance implementing those supports, and whether it be teachers or tutors? How do you balance that with money that has to be spent in the next couple of years?
So here's what I will probably, and this is probably the financial person in me. It's going to be a multi-year plan. The blueprint will be over 3 years, financially sustainable off those 3 years, with a plan of how do we look at what's working so that we can maintain those investments for the future. I will never allow a district, especially here in Chicago, because folks, you know this as in your professions. The worst thing you can do to any organization is put it into financial disarray. I don't care how strong your work is, your services, your products. If your institution is in financial disarray, you cannot have stability. You cannot plan. You cannot invest. I will never do that to our district. So the plan we're going to have, Brandis, is going to be a multi-year plan. It's going to be sustainable, and we're going to use these federal dollars as an opportunity to reimagine. And I'll tell you, but there's going to be some challenges that are really big. For example, I have some very severe under-enrolled schools, and I want to work with those neighborhoods because there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of history that we have to respect. And so it's going to be a combination of working together with neighborhoods, but I'm going to say this to everybody. I am going to need everybody's help in the city. I need our city leaders to feel vested in our success, because I can see the potential. I see it with our students. I see it with our staff. I need you to see it. And so that's going to be sort of one of my goals, is how do I connect with all of you so that you can see that and get you involved in our district. So there's going to be initiatives. We talked about some ideas, how to bring you back into schools. So that's something that I want you to know, that I want you to hold me to.
And I certainly want to get to that before we get out of here today as well. But you just brought up something. Your enrollment is down 100,000 kids over the last 20 years. Now, a recent report from Kids First Chicago points to 3 factors. One of them, a declining birth rate. So you could ask everybody to have more kids. Janice Jackson said that she almost got in trouble when she did that. I tell everybody they need to have more kids. So from 2009 to 2019, that averages, it's an average, about 11,000 fewer students available for Chicago Public Schools every year. They also point to slowing migration of Latino families and an out-migration of Black families. What is the school level impact of falling enrollment? Obviously, one of the things that you just mentioned is underutilized school buildings.
Yeah, it creates different challenges. On a positive note, because our state has been very progressive on looking at funding adequacy, we're held harmless when it comes to enrollment. So that helps. So that creates a floor. So we're not seeing our funding decline with enrollment declines. It creates an interesting question, though, about how do you invest those dollars, right? So those are some of the dollars that we're looking at. How do we reimagine some of our programs? Where I do see playing out, and it's very difficult, is I see some severely under-enrolled schools where we're putting in more money than ever. So it's ethically, I will never disinvest from a school. Children are gonna get at least the requirements that they need, whether it's to graduate, to get them ready and be successful for high school. But the problem is when the schools get so small, you can't have the richness of programming. And I love my bigger schools. I'm not gonna hide it. I was at Curie today, 3,000 kids. They have 10 different career tech programs. They have an IB program. They have program for advanced placement classes. I mean, they have, it's just, they have a preschool in their school for students that want to be teachers. And so you can have this richness in programming, but when you don't have the scale, it doesn't allow us to do that. And so, we're gonna have an initiative called Reimagining Neighborhood Schools, more to come. And what I'm going to need is a lot of help, especially from our philanthropic and business sector, I want to do it together with neighborhoods because part of this is building trust. I believe that in the next few years, we will stabilize enrollment. And I'll tell you, folks, I'm just telling you, you do not want to compete with CPS. Because when we get our act together, you know the programming we have in many of our schools. Second to none. So you do not want to be competing with us, especially as we get our act together. So just more to come.
That's a tease. So you talked a little bit about, obviously, how the state funds the district. You're held harmless, and obviously the money that you get is about bringing you up to equity. But from the district down to the schools, you're still using a student-based budgeting model, correct?
So
how does that work?
Yeah, so let me share with you something that my team and I are leading. So
are you breaking news? Do I need to write this down?
Well, I got to be careful what I say because we're still bringing the principals in. We have a meeting with them on Friday. But what I can tell you is that we're making a couple commitments to our schools. So first off, we brought them together and asked them directly, how do we set you up for success? We showed them the data, where we're at, and said, okay, how do we make sure you're our most important leaders to ensure that our future success is going to be there? So whether it's supporting our diverse learners, whether it's supporting our children with disabilities, our English language learners, children that live in poverty, children that are just behind, how do we best support them? And so we listed out our priorities. And what we said was, we're going to make sure that we're resourcing every school to meet those priorities. Some of them will build over time, but we're going to set some very aggressive investments. And then with that, we're still going to have resources where we start, again, reimagining different programs. So the good news about having the federal dollars right now is we have that opportunity. We have a very short window, roughly 3 years, which is why we have a 3-year runway, but that's going to be our plan. And my hope is that over time, you'll see some pilots that we'll do that I think will show, well, for parents, what I want you to expect is better services. By the way, one of our passions, access to the arts in every single school.
Okay. So CPS has, close to 40,000 employees, one of the biggest employees in the city. About 22,000 of those employees are teachers. How do you plan on addressing recruitment and retention for teachers, subs in particular, substitutes, which is a challenge?
Yeah, so first, we've elevated substitute rates more than ever. And in fact, by the way, I'm a big advocate for substitutes. One of the things that's happening, along with the tight labor market that every industry right now is facing, during the pandemic, I want you to understand this dynamic. During the pandemic, we held our full-time staff harmless in terms of we didn't lay off people because we didn't want to make the recession worse, but we couldn't provide work for our substitutes. Then we come back in person, and then you wonder why we have a shortage in substitutes, right? So this happened. I mean, this is nationwide. This is not unique to CPS. So I want you to understand that context, but what we've done is elevated their rates. We've created roles where we're also giving them health benefits, which is very important. But I'll tell you, the best way to address the issue is from the very beginning, making sure that we're strong in recruiting our teachers, not having a significant number of vacancies. We did very well in our recruitment of teachers last year. We're going to double down, a lot of early hiring. The good news is we have good data that tells us historically, how many vacancies we're going to have. And then what we're doing early is working with our schools now so that we set up these systems around adding the arts, intervention teachers. How do we set up a strong plan to develop our teachers? We're going to invest quite a bit in our teachers, and I think that's something that CPS has done historically, and I'll tell you, and I've been around the country, folks. I know sometimes, if you haven't been in other districts, it's hard to see this. Our district has some of the strongest capacity in terms of school leadership and teachers of most districts in the country, some of the strongest. Those systems were put in the early 2000s. There were hiring systems. There were ways to us to make sure we had high-quality school leaders, teachers. Is it perfect? No. But I'll tell you, those investments have stuck all through the last few decades. So to come back, when I was here when those systems were being put in place, 12 years, leave, come back, and seeing how those systems are now really reaping benefits, it's just, it's amazing for me to see that.
Obviously, the pandemic has, I don't know how to describe it. It's done a number on the mental health for everybody, your students, children in particular. But in some communities in Chicago, those children are also dealing with a significant amount of violence. How does the district plan to address the mental health needs?
So I'm going to make this plea to everyone. And I'm going to say this on behalf of my teachers. Teachers can only do so much. By the way, we train them to identify trauma. So their instruction is trauma informed, so they can see when a student is struggling. And we've added counselors, we've added social workers. There is no way for our district to do this on its own. We need to leverage the community. We need to leverage the city, we need to leverage the county, we need to leverage the state. I need mental health providers because we're seeing more acute needs than ever before. I need providers to be able to come in and to support us. I need organizations from hospitals, institutions. If you haven't built up your mental health capacity, I need you to build it up. We're seeing this. By the way, colleges are seeing it as well. And unfortunately, and I always share this quick story, I was on a panel with experts, mental health experts, national panel. And I remember somebody in Michigan who said, my middle class and upper class kids, upper income kids, phone can't stop ringing wanting services. My low income children, nothing. No phone calls, nothing in Michigan. And so she was going out to those communities, trying to seek out what happens in our community, everybody. Children who don't have means, they don't even see that as a possibility for them. They don't even see it. They just kind of muddle through it. That's just how you work, right, in life. And so all it does is create more disparities. And it especially affects our older children. And in Chicago, with our older children, you see more violence, you see more discipline, you see more kids dropping out of college. So this is something that I want to call out to everybody here, but it can't be just the responsibility of the school district. I need the city to be vested in this as well as the county and state.
What are, talking a little bit about your vision, what are your top priorities and concerns for CPS? What keeps you up?
So number one is building trust. I can't move the district forward if I don't have the trust of our staff internally, which we have done. That's probably where I spent my most time, even though you see me in the media a lot. Trust me, most of my time is spent internally, just making sure that our principals, we're addressing their challenges, working with teachers. So in spite of all the stuff you see, there's a lot of work being done internally, and we're seeing a lot of progress from that. Really, my next step is to build that trust with the community. I've been very active and visible in the community, and they tell me right away, they're like, we know you're new, we know you're not the one that created this, but we have these issues, and we're still skeptical. And what I tell them is, you will always have a seat at the table. It's like a big family, People hold grudges. I don't know, your big families, how you hold grudges? You'll always have a seat at the table when you're ready, and that's my commitment. And so you're gonna see, for example, we're gonna create neighborhood plans that actually show the data around access to programming, showing the academic outcomes we're getting in the neighborhoods, the investments that are happening, both that are happening today, that will be happening in the future. And I just want to have an upfront conversation. Let's talk about how do we solve these challenges. We know that our district has amazing programming, right? There's parents in this room that firsthand the really great programming we have in our schools. Is it consistent? Is the quality accessible? Is the quality consistent across the city? Is it accessible? I can tell you those two answers. We don't have a clear standard for quality. We're going to set that. We're going to put a plan to create accessibility. But it does mean that we have to be willing to do things differently. We have to be able to reimagine. We have the resources right now to be able to do that. I need to do that in the next 3 years. That's what I give myself, because I'm worried that if we don't, and we miss this opportunity, that we're not going to see improvement in enrollment. We're going to see more families leaving the city. And for our employees here, as well as I do, that is not a good thing. I grew up here in the 80s. I remember downtown in the 80s. You guys remember downtown in the 80s? It was not what it is today. I remember Grant Park, that didn't even exist in the 80s. It was different. It was a different city in the 80s. Folks, we've made so much progress as a city. We've made so much progress as a district. This is the time to double down and say we're not going to let our city or our district go backwards. Not going to happen under our watch. That's what I need everybody in this room to feel. Not under our watch, everybody.
What's the future of education? Is it, interdisciplinary classrooms? Is it year-round school? What does it look like?
So I think, what I see in the future, so first of all, I am very passionate about high schools. I really am. And so for me, what I see in the future is this connection, because we used to be college and careers, and I always thought that's just such a weird argument. Like, kids don't even understand what that means. It's everything coming together. So children getting college credit while they're in high school. Because folks, for children of poverty who have a very low confidence level, It's not about college readiness. You put them in college. You put them in college while they're in high school because they don't know better. They don't know better. You put them in college courses. You get them ready right from the beginning. All of our educators know that, right? You get children to see this highway that is so clear with multiple lanes, and there's exit ramps. And so if you want to get off because you're getting your certificate and you're getting some college credit and you want to work, get off. Go ahead. Go ahead and do some work. Hey, I worked off since I was 14 years old. I've been working. I get that. You want to come back on and get your associate's degree? You come back on. You want to get off and do some work again? You go ahead and do it. You want to come back and get your bachelor's degree? Go ahead. And but you can see the whole thing. This is what Chancellor Salgado and I have been working on. And we connect it to our universities. We connect it all the way. So imagine in our high schools having pathways for technology, for healthcare, for advanced manufacturing, for education, for the trades, which, by the way, are not what they used to be in the 50s and 60s. People still have this mindset. Folks, it doesn't exist anymore. They are now in the community colleges and employers partnering together. They have all the updated equipment. Have you tried to fix your car? I grew up fixing my car. You know how different it is to fix a car today? Do you know the shortage we have in cars nationwide? It's not because they don't have enough glass, they don't have enough steel. You know what the shortage is? Computer chips. It is a different world. We have to recognize it. Our children, by the way, know it. This generation is more informed than any of us ever were growing up. So we have to take advantage of that. And so it's having those relevant programs in the high schools, back mapping that all the way down to preschool. That's how you do it. That's what our blueprint will begin. I won't promise you that, remember, I've only been here 6 months. So, our blueprint will begin to show that to you. And then again, you have to hold us accountable. Let's have high expectations. Let's take ownership of where the future of our district is going to be.
We're getting close to closing, and then I'll invite Ryan to come back up. Okay, I got really nervous that my face was up there for a second. You mentioned in your remarks ways for the business industry to partner with and to support. I'll go through them again. Obviously, there's the Children First Fund, your philanthropic arm, work-based, I get paid to talk, work-based learning opportunities, volunteering. How else can the business community invest in public schools?
So number one, again, I want you to listen in the future for these P-TECH initiatives. These are initiatives where I got in my former state, got the chance to actually help write the legislation. It's a concept that came out of New York. We have one school on the far southwest side that has it, where we have children actually getting associate degrees. I want to take this to a whole different scale, where we're connecting our industries, our higher ed, starting with community colleges, but adding universities, and our high schools together. And for us to, and what I love, in schools that I've created in other districts, our work professionals, whether, for example, in IT, they're coming in and working with teachers on curriculum. They're working on what the latest trends are, whether it's healthcare, IT, manufacturing, and that's how you get this ownership across the community, because everybody, this is your future workforce. And instead of you waiting, we give you a chance to come in early. And so that's, for me, is one of the biggest opportunities, but we also want to make sure that you have access to our schools. And we have 600 schools. I have over 100 high schools. There's plenty of things that I want you to see, because here's what I'm going to guarantee you. 2 things that I've learned in the last 20 years. Number one, when you meet our children, you will fall in love with them. You will fall in love with them. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I don't care how hard-nosed you are, you will fall in love with them. They're just those kind of kids. Second, when we set high expectations for our children, they always exceed them. They always, as long as we have the supports and the encouragement, they always exceed them. And so that's the opportunity that I'm giving all of you, is for you to, I'm opening the doors to our schools. More to come. We're going to have some clear initiatives around that. And I want you to develop that relationship so that you get to see what's happening, and we change the narrative of what's happening in our city.
On the opposite side of that, what is the responsibility of the private sector to get involved in public schools?
And I used to say this in San Antonio, and it was a lot easier for me, because in San Antonio I would say, I'm not from San Antonio. I would a group like this all the time, and trust me, you can check this out from people that knew me in San Antonio, is that I would say, it's not my city, not my community. I didn't grow up here. Here's what I'm seeing. If you don't take ownership of it, who will? Now, fast forward to Chicago. This is my city. This is my community. This is where I grew up. This is the district that gave me the opportunities that I have, including all my siblings. And I implore of you, get involved. It is your responsibility to make sure that our city is as strong as possible. You have reaped the benefits. God bless you. God bless you. You reap the benefits. You have your education. You have your resources. What I can tell you right now, the number one question I get is, Pedro, what is it going to take to educate these kids in poverty? What is it going to take? Like, how much money? How much money? Come on, you know. And I say, I don't know how to put a price tag on it. Because how do I put a price tag on what you will do for your children because you have the means? Let's call it like it is. You guys might have, you might have, sons and daughters. They might be C students. You don't want to admit it, but you might be. Tell me you're not going to do whatever it takes to get them the tutors. If they want to be a lawyer, you're going to call your lawyer friends to get them access to the law firms. If they want to be a doctor, you're going to get them involved in hospitals. You're going to get them an internship. Tell me, all of you, who's not going to do that? Who wouldn't do that? We all would. My families who live in poverty, they want to. They don't have the means. They don't have the access. And so that's what all of us, I want all of us to work together is how do we create a system? And we have a chance to do it here in the third largest city in the country. How do we create a system that is inclusive, that says under our watch, no child is going to fall between the cracks? We have the resources. Again, I grew up here in the 80s. A lot of the stuff that exists here didn't exist when I was growing up. Downtown didn't look like it looked. I've been to neighborhoods now that I can't even recognize them. Sadly, I've been to neighborhoods that look exactly the same from 30 years ago. So what are we going to do about it? That's my question to all of you. What are we going to do about it? Let's unite together. It's an amazing time. We can reimagine what's happening in our district. We can reimagine what's happening in our city.
Call to action from Pedro Martinez. Ryan, I'm going to invite you back up. Please help me thank Pedro Martinez.